Ag Bioscience, the #1 ag tech podcast globally, is now available on video. Hear from leaders and innovators across food, animal health, plant science, ag tech, and agriculture. Mondays at 6 a.m. on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, subscribe and leave us a review. It's the Ag Bioscience Podcast with Agronovis Indiana. Get more information at agronovisindiana.com.
This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of June 8th, 2026, brought to you by Taft. I'm IBJ editor Leslie Weidenbender. Host Mason King is out this week. Stepping in is IBJ arts and culture reporter Dave Lindquist. He brings us a conversation with Alex Richardson, the chair of the Indy Pride Incorporated board. Alex became chair of Indy Pride in December, and the group named Jennifer Carruthers as executive director in January. The pair is now preparing for the group's annual parade and festival, which is scheduled for June 13th. Dave talks with Alex about what's new and what will be familiar when members of the LGBTQ community and allies gather downtown for the local centerpiece of Pride Month. Alex, a faculty member at DePaul University, also addresses Governor Mike Braun's pronouncement of June as Nuclear Family Month, a statement that emphasizes a structure of one husband, one wife, and any children. Here's their conversation.
I'm Indianapolis Business Journal reporter Dave Lindquist, and I'm happy to welcome to the IBJ Podcast Alex Richardson, who serves as chair of Indy Pride Inc. This weekend represents the crescendo of Pride Month in Indianapolis, where members of the LGBTQ community and allies will gather for the parade, festival, and other activities downtown. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Dave. Nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with your role at Indy Pride Inc. You were named chair in December, and you previously served as vice chair. What did you learn about the organization and what it might need during your time as vice chair?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm pretty new to Indianapolis and pretty new to the Midwest more generally. And early on in my time in Indianapolis, one of the first events that my partner and I attended was Indy Pride. I knew immediately that I wanted to get involved in that organization, and I'm pretty cognizant that my star, at least internally at Indy Pride, has risen pretty quickly. I spent some time just on the board in the first year, and in the second year, we had a sort of higher than normal turnover rate on our board, and so there was sort of space and opening and opportunity, I guess you might say, for interested folks who wanted to do a little extra to serve on the executive board. So I volunteered for lack of interest, I suppose. The vice chair is a sort of interesting position where you're kind of playing second fiddle. You're kind of backing up your colleague and stepping in when necessary. But I learned a lot from my fellow executive committee members about the organization's history, what it's meant to Indianapolis, how far it's come in the some 30 years that it's existed. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. Right. We're looking forward to decade number 4. And I learned a lot from my predecessor. And as you said, I became chair in December, and it feels like a lot to inherit. It feels like I have some big shoes to fill and lots of history looking at us to see what's next for an organization that a lot of people love a lot. So I feel that weight, and I feel a little bit of pressure a week out, but it's a joyful occasion and a joyful organization to be a part of. It does have its challenges, as all things do, but it's a good time.
When you talk about first impressions of perhaps the parade and the festival, it's sensory overload.
Oh, for sure.
Could you talk a little bit about the energy that the people are going to encounter this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's sensory overload in the best of ways, right? I was immediately struck at the Indy Pride parade when I experienced it for the first time. Maybe because the Mass Avenue drag doesn't feel like a lot of other big city parades.
Okay.
Like it feels close, communal, exciting. The streets are not huge. It's not like a highway kind of feeling thing. It's not like New York Street, which is 6 lanes at its widest, right? It feels kind of like homey and close quarters, and you get to really see people up close and personal. Yeah. You get to hear them. You get to experience, I think, a really interesting and joyful occasion. And you get everything from, marching bands to drag queens to local companies that are showing a little color for the month of June. There's a lot to look at. It's really exciting. And I think it's a good chance to see, Indianapolis as a diverse city. The Midwest, I'm new to the Midwest, as I said, and I think the Midwest gets an unfair rap as flyover country, which is not, one of the square states, so to speak, that aren't always as sort of diverse and exciting and energy-filled as folks from the coasts might have you believe. But as I said, one of my first experiences of Indianapolis was the parade and festival, and I would say that the folks on the coast who think we're boring are resoundingly wrong.
Very good. If I could quote the mission statement for Indy Pride Inc.,
I do every day.
It's listed as create spaces of connection, celebration, and belonging rooted in queer joy and collective resilience. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of words in there. The two that I think step out to me the most are joy and resilience. And you might see those in some ways as two sides of the same coin. The LGBTQ community in Indianapolis, but also just around the country, is one that's been through quite a lot. We've come a really long way in just the last 20 to 30 years in terms of everyday walking around the street acceptance of the way that many of us live. And I think with a community that sort of integrates into society so quickly like that, there have been lots of, less than stellar moments in that history to overcome. Some of them have been violent. Some of them have been, associated with illness and death in the 1980s around the AIDS crisis, right? The community as a whole, if you can consider it that, because it's not, of course, like a monolith, right?
Sure.
But if you consider it as a whole, the community's been through a lot, right? So I think resilience is a really interesting thing to sort of think about and feel on your shoulders as you plan events which are otherwise designed to celebrate joy, right? So there's that difficult line to walk where Pride Month and Pride celebrations historically are based from and sort of descended from protests, right? People in the streets demanding loudly their right to be seen, heard, and ultimately integrated into society. Things are a little bit easier for us because of their work. And I think one way of sort of paying homage to that is to recognize how far we've come, how resilient the community has been, how much it has sort of stood up to and in spite of in the last 50 to 60 years. And then I would say the joy bit steps out at me importantly, because I think it's really important for queer people to have spaces in the city that they call home, in public, to sort of gather and sort of stand up and be counted, right? For many of the same reasons that their predecessors, their sort of forebears, did. But it's remarkable how sort of closely those two things feel like they go together in the month of June, which sounds a little bit crazy, but they work together delicately.
Yeah, that's interesting. Of course, another big change at Indy Pride arrived in January when the organization hired Jennifer Carruthers as executive director. What made Jennifer the correct candidate?
Jen made Jen the correct candidate. She is a force of nature. She's a really, really dedicated member of the community, and she's got a lot of operations and production knowledge in her background. So she comes to us from Des Moines, Iowa, where she was involved in the leadership of Capital City Pride there in Des Moines for a very long time. And we saw both on paper, in the way that you do when you're sort of screening candidates, right, an enormous uptick in things like attendance numbers and audience engagement, and importantly, in funds raised and in sort of organizational stability. So we saw on paper a candidate who could really sort of fulfill those goals of ours as we think about, what Indy Pride has been for 30 years and what year 40 and year 50 and so on and so forth are going to feel like. So we were really interested in a candidate who brought a wealth of experience and brought a wealth of kind of stable organizational leadership in a way that prioritizes kind of growth and engagement with the community. And she brings with that a genuinely dedicated personality. She's out in the community. If you've been at any of our events lately, she likes to ride her scooter around town. She has an electric scooter, but she tends to do so with pride flags hanging out of her bag. So she's easily recognizable, but she's always out in front of the community, out talking to folks, hearing about what their experiences are, hearing about our community in particular, how we can better serve them and create resources, programs, and ultimately spaces for them. So we're really proud of her progress so far. It's been an interesting 6 months. She didn't get the full year of advanced planning that organizational planners for an event of this size often get, but she's integrated to Indianapolis quite well, and we're quite excited to see what she pulls off next weekend. She's really been hard at work, and Indianapolis, I believe, can have someone to be proud of in Jen Carruthers.
We should do a geographic reset. You mentioned that she came from Des Moines. I believe she grew up in Illinois.
That's right.
And you grew up in Georgia.
I did. So we're both sort of expats, if you will, refugees to the Midwest. And yeah, we're both. I mean, she's of course not brand new to the Midwest, having grown up in Illinois and gone a little bit further west, but she brings with her tons of engagement in communities that she's been in. It seems to follow her wherever she goes. And if you meet her and have a conversation with her, you'll see why.
Now you're going with a new format that's also a nod to the past for this year's Indy Pride Festival. What's happening, when, and where?
Great. We've got a little bit of old and a little bit of new. So the thing I can say that is old and continuing and not going anywhere is the iconic parade down Massachusetts Avenue. That's a sort of community favorite. It draws between 40 and 60,000 people over the last few years. It's a standing room only event along the Mass Avenue corridor. That'll be on June 13th, next Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. We'll be stepping off with, I believe, over 200 parade entries. Nice. So we've been registering vendors and companies and nonprofits and community organizations from all across the city, all across all walks of life since really early April. So we've been building the parade sequence for some time, and that's really a sort of crowd favorite. So that old favorite's coming back. But as you mentioned, the festival is going to look a little bit different this year. But there is also, as you say, a nod to the past there. We're returning the Indy Pride Festival to its home in recent years in Military Park downtown. That footprint's been pretty kind to us and been a nice sort of complex for us to balance our goals, some of which are, free and accessible programming for the community that involves engaging them with vendors and resources and, things to do around Indianapolis, and parts of which our community have asked us for over time, which are, increasingly known and sophisticated musical acts. So our main stage will be in Military Park, and because of the IU Indianapolis construction on the back end of Military Park, we're gradually starting to expand into White River State Park as well. So that's where some of our vendor footprint is going to be: a sober zone, a zone for kids and family, and our Pet Pride event on Sunday, which is a pretty perennial favorite. So the festival itself will be mostly on Saturday. The grounds will be open between noon, 12 o'clock, and our last set at 10 p.m. We've got some really interesting headliners joining us on the main stage, including a sort of diverse cast of characters ranging from Todrick Hall, who's a really popular queer Broadway and pop star, to some kind of country authenticity with Brooke Eden, and some nice historical nods to the history and musicology of house music in Crystal Waters. So it's a really, really interesting lineup. And of course, we have a community stage as well, featuring lots of local talent from Indianapolis and from the region that'll really showcase kind of what Indianapolis's vibe is all about. So there's something for everyone, we hope, during that weekend. So the parade will occur on Saturday morning, June 13th. From the afternoon to the evening, we'll have the whole festival grounds open on the 13th there in Military and White River State Park. And then we'll have a slightly adjusted, smaller footprint on Sunday for our Pet Pride event, which will be held in conjunction with a fellow queer-focused nonprofit, the Indy Gay Market, which is a sort of like artisan vendor market, who's joining us for the Sunday footprint.
Got it.
A lot to do.
And as a prelude, and this is brand new, Indy Pride is a presenter of a show at Everwise Amphitheatre on Friday night starring Australia's Tash Sultana. What influenced the decision to do that?
Yeah, I think we were looking for something. Number one, our community's particularly interested in music. They're particularly interested in generating a lot of energy and excitement around the artists we bring to town. And we wanted to balance, as I mentioned before, two kind of goals that might pull us in slightly different directions with the festival. On one end, getting really high quality, well-known musical acts, and on the other end, keeping ticket prices pretty low and accessible. So we've sort of balanced out the schedule by, yes, including a ticketed portion of the festival, but also separating out some of those concert going experiences a little bit. So this has been a really great partnership with Live Nation here in Indy, who helped us source Tash. I was not familiar with Tash before we started looking at her for these events, but she's genre defying in a really interesting way. If you have a chance to go see her, definitely do.
It looks like she plays about a dozen instruments.
Oh, yeah. Multi-instrumentalist, great vocals. Like, she's all over the place in the very best way.
Let's take a break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Building a home or looking to upgrade what you already have? That's where Indy Grills comes in. From fireplaces, outdoor kitchens, to entire custom patios, we bring everything together to create spaces designed for how you actually live. We work directly with homeowners and partner with custom home builders to get it right from the very start. Are you looking for inspiration? Our massive showroom on the Zionsville-Lebanon border was built to help you see what's possible. So when you're ready to elevate your space, head to indygrills.com and connect with our team.
Thanks for listening to the IBJ Podcast. We'll rejoin a conversation between IBJ Arts reporter Dave Lindquist and Indy Pride Board Chair Alex Richardson.
Now, one of the challenges with promoting a show is spreading the word. What have you been able to do in that regard?
Yeah, we're doing our best to pound the pavement in all the way we know how. So word of mouth is obviously huge in our community, and so we're engaged with lots of queer businesses and queer-owned businesses in the local community that serve our community quite extensively. We're doing lots of sort of print and flyer advertising all around the city. We're doing a digital marketing campaign with ads and social media. We've done a couple of ticket giveaways that have been quite popular to the point where we're struggling to keep up with the responses. But that's a great problem to have. And we've recently, too, I should say, as part of our leadership transition this past year, launched an all-new website platform. So it's really been nice to have a kind of centralized, redesigned, custom-built sort of source of truth for everywhere to live. And as you mentioned, there's a lot to communicate out, and the community is not a monolith. Different people are interested in different things. So we're really taking an effort to plan a week or even longer, a season of events where people can kind of see themselves a little bit in whatever they choose and kind of build their own schedule. So in the past, few weeks, and of course leading up through the end of June, we'll not only have the festival, but all kinds of other moments too, like Pride nights with each of the local sports teams, a new iteration of our community cookout program, which features a nice gather everybody in the park for lunch, but also have the local drag queens put on a game of softball for us.
Got it.
It's a delightful moment. We also do quieter gatherings. We've just partnered up with Tomorrow Bookstore over on Mass Avenue to create Pride Reads, which is a new book club that's focused on sort of historical and genre-defying queer literature. So our real mission with a lot of these events and sort of getting them out there, as you say, is for everyone to see a little bit of themselves and for everyone to see something that sort of tickles their fancy. So we hope to have something for everyone.
Now, I'm intrigued by something that's on the lineup Saturday in Military Park, the New York City Ballroom Showcase. What will happen during that, and why is it an important part of history?
The New York City Ballroom Showcase is a curated show featuring some of the most iconic performers in the sort of underground New York City ballroom genre, which grew up in Harlem really in the early 1970s. There's a really great kind of synoptic documentary about this that listeners may have seen. It's called Paris is Burning.
Right.
But it's a really interesting art form that popularized particular forms of like breakdance and voguing. And this was before Madonna too, right? So this genre, which primarily prioritizes Black and Latino performers, is really something that's worked its way into popular culture and into popular music and dance. So it's really great to sort of go to the source,
Sure.
so to speak, and bring some of those iconic performers here to Indianapolis. So it's a really nice nod, I think, to queer history, not just in New York, but around the country, and kind of a nod to some of those other marginalized communities that have worked hard to have us enjoy the things that we do and contributed so much to our culture.
Alex, if I could pause to ask about the political backdrop for this year's Pride Month.
Sure.
Some elected officials made headlines last week. Andy Ogles, a Congress member from Tennessee, the state where you attended college, had a social media post that stated, quote, "Homosexuality has no place in America." In Indiana, Governor Mike Braun proclaimed June as, quote, "Nuclear Family Month," emphasizing a structure of, quote, "one husband, one wife, and any children." What's your reaction when you see and hear these kinds of statements?
My initial knee-jerk reaction is yikes. But my more considered reaction, I think, is this. Look, these are like little aesthetic signals that are designed to be a kind of swipe. And yes, they are important signals because they signal what our leaders' priorities are and what our leaders' priorities, importantly, are not. But that said, it's not affecting our schedule very much, right? We as you said, have a mission to attend to and a series of events in support of that mission to continue producing. And I think it's especially important, perhaps more important than ever, to create spaces for queer people to be sort of seen, heard, and engaged with when their leaders won't. And to the point of Governor Braun's sort of proclamation here in Indiana, we like nuclear families too. We have them too. Nuclear family is worth celebrating, but so then are other kinds of families. The grandmother who raises her grandchild, the single mom who gives everything she has just to keep up with it. And importantly, for queer folks, those chosen families who show up for us and love us when sometimes our biological families either can't or won't, as the case may be. So, I mean, I think my initial reaction to that is that there are lots of things a family can look like, and all of those structures are valid and ought to be seen and to be valued. I think all families are doing something admirable. Not only is that not in conflict with the governor's idea of what family should be, it is in fact in support of it, right? And I would argue that we go a step further by creating space where all families can be seen and celebrated. You know, if the governor wants to proclaim, that's his prerogative. We're going to carry on and set about making space for all families, for all people. There's room at our table.
I was going to ask about this White River State Park takeover, but you've already kind of touched on that. But Military Park, as you mentioned, serves as the site of Indy Pride Festival from 2017 to 2024. Why does that spot work for the event?
Yeah, it works really well, I think, because of its location. Ingress, egress, like the ability to get to it and get out of it, I think is really nice for people. It's close enough to the downtown corridor to be walkable to lots of other stuff. And it's just a large open space. There are also some important kind of safety and security features. It's set back off the street a little bit. White River State Park in particular has some levels, has some natural grading, has some natural barriers, right? So we are thinking of some of those safety and security concerns too, of, you know, where it's best, most appropriate, and most efficient to have, you know, several tens of thousands of people coming in and out and milling about during the course of the day. So it's a really nice nice kind of homecoming for us. As you gestured to earlier, we experimented with some different venues in 2025, both Monument Circle, where we're sitting now, and the American Legion Mall over off of Meridian. And both of those spaces were interesting, but they presented some interesting challenges. Both of them are pretty open. Both of them are pretty hard to secure. And both of them are spaces where folks are kind of coming and going. So it's, each space comes with its own challenges, but Military Park feels like home. And as I mentioned earlier, IU Indy is doing a fantastic job of developing that area. So there's a little less space in Military Park than there used to be, hence the White River expansion. So we're thinking long term about a space that we can be in for a while, grow into as we sort of pursue some of our organizational growth goals, as we continue to make Indy Pride a kind of Midwestern destination for celebrating queer life and queer people. We want a space we can grow into and can grow with us.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've actually seen some marketing verbiage of bring pride home. Is that?
I don't know.
Okay.
We have been thinking and talking about what people's experience of it has been over the last few years, and we're still talking to lots of community members to find out what exactly bringing it home means for them.
Yeah.
In some ways, like last year's experimentation with Monument Circle was a return to form as well. The original Indy Pride celebration in 1995 was called Celebration on the Circle. There's a historical marker not 500 yards from where we're sitting that commemorates that event. And so we've been thinking carefully in response to community feedback about where home is, what people would like to see, and where we can best efficiently and most safely deliver on what they want and what they expect. So for us, that's Military Park, and it's gradually expanding into White River State Park. The area is beautiful, the waterfront's nice, and the Indianapolis skyline, contrary to being one of those flyover square states, is gorgeous.
I agree. Of course, we don't want to downplay. The parade's participants include churches, massive corporations, hometown small businesses. What does that say about Indy Pride's appeal? And
yes, yeah, it includes all of those groups and more and weirder. And you might think that those groups don't belong in spaces together. And as you suggest, I think that's exactly a testament to the kind of appeal that Indy Pride has. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the governor's comments, there's room for everyone. I think Indy Pride casts a really big tent. There's no one right way to be queer, to be an ally. But I think there's space for all kinds of comers, right? From, folks who are willing to celebrate their employee resource groups around LGBTQ issues. So big companies like Lilly and Salesforce, to, local churches who are just trying to do right by their members, and local mom and pop businesses, or mom and mom businesses, as the case may be, right? I think there's room for everyone, and the parade's an excellent showcase for that.
And you mentioned some pretty substantial numbers in terms of people who come out for Pride Weekend.
The audiences have fluctuated a little bit over the past couple of years as we've experimented with different formats and different arrangements and so on. But the parade is probably the most reliably predictable event. And as I said before, usually between 40 and 60 on the higher end. 1,000 people attend the parade and stuff themselves into little corridors along Mass Avenue just to catch a glimpse of the show. We're expecting this year and planning for approximately 40 to 50,000 people coming in and out of Military Park. So as you might guess, that presents lots of logistical and infrastructure challenges, but those are things that we're working hard on. Part of the reason you get me for this interview instead of someone more close to our operations footprint is that they're all quite busy.
I imagine.
They're turning Military Park into the space to be next weekend, pretty much as we speak.
All right, if I can wrap up and ask a question that might be expected from the Indianapolis Business Journal.
Sure.
How's the financial health of Indy Pride Inc.? In 2024, the most recent year a tax return is publicly available, expenses outpaced revenue by $210,000.
Yeah. So it probably will come to no surprise that the environment is a little bit more challenging than it used to be. We do have some of our challenges, and we're working pretty diligently, as you said, with some of these staffing changes and some of these strategy updates to close that gap. But I will say that the sort of corporate environment that we've relied on for some time in terms of sponsorship has changed pretty drastically in the last year, amidst some of the priorities of the new Trump administration, in particular around corporate giving associated with causes that the administration regards to be actionably associated with diversity causes, right? We've seen some corporate downturn. We've seen some companies and some reliable partners from the past start to pull away a little bit. So that has been a challenge, and that's represented in our revenues over the last year or so. But we're importantly working to diversify that strategy. This past fall, we launched an individual giving campaign. It's called Together We Thrive. We've seen already a really strong response from our community in terms of individual giving, and we hope to continue that momentum over the next year. Earlier this spring, in conjunction with the all famous Indy 500, we launched our own add-on, if you will. We call it the Indy Pride 500.
Okay.
But it's an opportunity for local businesses, small businesses in particular, and small groups who may not otherwise generally come to the table with big sponsorship dollars.
Right.
To have a new venue and a new sort of inroads to sort of buy into Indy Pride, $500 at a time. And so we've been pounding the pavements on those and giving local businesses a chance to show their color. We've got a lovely rainbow checker flag that we can put up in their windows as they begin to support the campaign. And we're also interested in what we do for our community in terms of health and wellness initiatives and educational initiatives. So we're increasingly pounding the pavements for sort of grant and foundation funding in those spaces too. So I think it's really about diversifying the strategy and really being careful stewards of funding in an era where it's not as guaranteed as it used to be.
For more information about Indy Pride festivities, visit indypride.org. Thank you, Alex, for your time today.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks to Dave and Alex for that conversation. You can keep up with the region's arts and culture news by subscribing to Dave's weekly free newsletter, After Hours. Go to IBJ.com to subscribe. While you're there, check out our latest coverage about the Bears' decision to move forward with a stadium project in Hammond and read about the changes underway within the Marion County Democratic Party. Plus, we've got the latest news from Venco, a company that wants to build nuclear generation in Indiana, and learn how Carmel-based Byrider, a used car dealership franchisor, is coming back after pandemic and business woes. Thanks again for listening to the IBJ Podcast. Mason King will be back next week.